May peace and blessings be upon you all. Hi guys, this is Shahadat, and today I'm going to make this review video of the question and answer session that took place with Sadhguru in London School of Economics. Now, going through some of the answers, I thought, how can somebody give such dumb answers to in front of a hall full of really brilliant brains? But I guess that's the magic of faith, belief, blind belief, in fact, that we take people as our spiritual gurus and digest or basically swallow wholesale whatever they give. We don't care whether it's we don't look into the quality. We don't really check what is given to us. But well, I mean, let's go through the session, and then I'll basically, when I give you my reasons, hopefully that will be clear to you. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole video today. If I share my screen, you can see that this is a about 40 minutes long video where Sadhguru talked about lots of different things. I'm going to make videos on the questions I don't agree with him, or the answers I thought was like really poor quality answers, crazy answers in fact. So and the first question actually qualified, or the answer to the first question actually qualified for that. So what we are going to do now is play the answer, and I'll pause the video at different points to give you my understanding or why I think it's a poor quality answer. I'll give you my reasons for that. So let's start.
You can raise your hands.
Thank you very much, Sadhguru, for the
Where are
exciting...
you?
Hey, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the exciting discussion. So I wanted to ask, normally as students, we start the term very excited, and we do things very, as you said, blissfully. But by the end of the term, with a lot of outside pressure, we moved from blissful to stressful. So my question is how to maintain that positive or pleasant state of experience.
Now that's a very interesting question. At the same time, it's if you think about it deeply, it's a dumb question. When you are already acknowledging the fact that there are lots of external pressures, obviously when you are studying the term, you are not having to do these extra things. These external pressures are not on you. So it makes sense that you are having a happy life because there is no pressure. Then her question is basically, I guess what she was trying to ask is, when we encounter such force from outside, external forces, how do we still stay happy and still hold control over our emotions? Now, interestingly, it depends on the circumstances. There are situations that we can deal with depending on how stressful it is. We will have different response to it. Now, obviously, Sadhguru will give a solution because the way he did in the past, experience is from within. So you should feel blissful even if it doesn't matter what. I wonder if I mean, just hypothetically, if Sadhguru was like beaten up really badly, would he then, every time getting beaten up, every time receiving the punch, would he still say, oh, so happy? Or he say, oh, that hurts? Which one will do? Interesting thought in my head. But basically what I'm trying to say is, depending on what it is, if it is just something that is manageable, people usually find ways to manage it, and then they live their life. There are other things that are kind of like outside this manageability control, And again, different people have got different manageability power. That is another factor that plays into it as well. So it's not a simple solution. It's a complicated thing depending on what we are talking about, depending on who is involved, depending on where the pressure is coming from, and depending on how much the subject is able to deal with it. If then you get a solution for this sort of questions. A generalized answer for everybody usually doesn't work. Okay, so now let's go and see what Sadhguru's answer to this question is.
Well, you need to understand the simple mechanics of how this functions.
Okay.
See, now all of us are sitting. I don't want to pick on all of you. Let's say 3 or 4 of us are sitting here. Each one of us is sitting in our own different ways. The geometry of your body and your chemistry are very related. How you hold your body will determine
That's a good joke.
quick learner. Listen, this also. No. So, the simple thing that we need to learn is we become conscious of how we hold our body, how we breathe, how we walk, how we move, and also how our thought, emotion, other things function within us. It just takes… you have the necessary awareness and intelligence. It's just never been applied. You're busy applying it to the world.
That's interesting because, you see, all these thoughts, they are always happening in us. And sometimes it is not, I mean, if you think about, like we forget things. Why do we forget things? We forget things is because we do not really have control over the mechanism of remembering. Thoughts pop up at times and in other times they don't. And and we get focused on, we get attracted to different things in different times. And so it is not a simple equation. Is like if you train yourself to be one way, it'll just work. The other problem I have with this answer is, you, as it is, you have a lot of worries, you have a lot of things happening in your head. Now on top you are adding consciousness, so always be aware about what you're thinking, and all the other things that Sadhguru said. If you start thinking about those, the amount of worry, the amount of things you will be thinking in one moment will actually be like increased by 3-4 folds, and that will itself drive you nuts.
By applying it to the world, a few situations in the world may change, but your experience of life will not change. See, as a generation of people, never before another generation of people knew these kind of comforts and conveniences that all of us are enjoying, isn't it so?
That's true.
Hello? Aren't we the most comfortable generation ever? We are. But are we the most joyful generation ever? No.
We
So
don't know.
obviously, by changing the outside situation, we can create comfort and convenience. You cannot create well-being, because human experience happens from within.
I said no, because there is no actually hard evidence. It is an assumption that the present day and the present world is complicated, and it has got so much stress, and that's why we are not happy. We have got lots of the luxuries and we are not happy. There is that understanding. It is kind of like we look at it and we think that way. We measure, or the standard of measurement, the scale of measurement here is we have lots of things now, materials now that we can use, and so the inference from that is then we are supposed to be happy. But if you go back 500 years ago, it didn't have all those things, but in those time it is difficult to say that those people were absolutely perfectly happy. it is possible that those people are not happy with what they had, and we are not happy with what we have. So having that comparison, the people can make all sorts of claims because there is no real way to actually prove how the old people were, and simply say that they were much better than us, or they enjoyed a much better life than us. Our life is all messed up. And the way, I mean, as soon as we say our quality of life is not there, that's because we are measuring it against something. And if we are assuming that that something was better, then obviously what we have now is going to be not as good compared to that. So there are quite a few things you need to think about before making this judgment. Anyway, let's go back to the discussion.
This is not just a random thing, there is an entire science. As there is a science and technology to address external well-being, there is a whole science and technology to address inner well-being. Today our education systems, I'm sorry, I'm not making a critique of an institution like this.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible that there is a science for our internal things, engineering and science for our internal things, and the discipline of psychology, I think, deals with that to some extent. So it's not that nobody's looking into it. There are people looking into it, trying to figure things out, but the way Sadhguru refers to it, it feels like nobody knows about this science, which probably is not true. Anyway, let's go back to the...
Our education system from kindergarten onwards, there is nothing about you. You're reading about the worm, you're reading about the butterfly, you're reading about the plant, you're reading about the globe, you're reading about other galaxies. Nothing about this one. Yes? But
It depends on what you mean by this one. If this one is your soul, your consciousness, then there is something, but it's not talked about as much as it should probably be talked about. It is not taught as much as it should probably be taught. I can agree to that, but just depends on what you mean. I mean, we learn about our bodies from a very early age, right? Body, like the physical aspects of our body. We learn about those. So pointing finger to this, it's difficult what you mean.
human experience is 100% manufactured within you, is it so? Have you seen in the same given situation, one person is thoroughly enjoying it, another person is immensely suffering it? So obviously it's not the situation, isn't it? You can do whatever you want. Because they did not handle it properly, they invented heaven.
Now, to that answer, as I gave the example early on, it is not entirely voluntary. It is not entirely in your control. Depends on what is happening. Somebody is trying to call me names, trying to torture. I mean, some of you guys do that. Brother Kiran Bala, he sends me all sorts of questions that are not relevant to my topic, the subject that I'm discussing, and he's thinking that he's going to get me angry and get me to say something foolish. But I have already made up my mind about it, and it doesn't matter what he says, it doesn't affect me. So I am in this situation. Doesn't matter what he throws at me, doesn't matter what he says, I'm blissful. Fair enough. But if the situation was different, if the situation is, if I, say, if we turn the table, say for example, whatever I say, Kiran Bala brother is okay with that and he's very happy, he can maintain his happiness, doesn't matter what I say, okay. But then I get hold of him and give him, start beating the shit out of him. Do you think he will still be in that blissful state? Will he be able to? No. I mean, unless he has got some sort of problem where his nerve system doesn't work, he will not be able to enjoy it. I mean, he will not be. So that question depends on circumstances, depends on what is happening. If it's a mental thing, again, depending on what sort of mental thing it is. Somebody is just swearing at me, it is quite easy to ignore it. But somebody, Sadhguru talks about relationship a lot. So let's bring relationship in the equation. My wife suddenly decides to bring a man with her, and she wants to do stuff in the bedroom, and she wants me to be okay with it. Or in that situation, Sadhguru's prescription is, don't get stressed. Stay calm and enjoy it. Is that going to work? In my case, it will definitely not work. There will be, somebody will end up being dead. So that's what I'm saying. The solution that he's giving are solutions of specific problems, but he prescribes it in a sense that it is for everything. And that's not true. Now, we are talking about dealing with our stress, making, living a meaningful life in the world. So heaven hasn't got anything really to do with it. Right. But looks like Sadhguru has invoked the concept of heaven. And now he will go on about bidding the shit out of heaven. But the thing is, he's really clever on this point. When he'll say that he has these three questions that can actually destroy 90% of the scripture. Now that 90% word is the key here. So if you go with your scripture to him and say that my scripture is the right one, he will say, yes, I said 90%, all the others are wrong. They will not be able to stand these three questions. I go with my scripture and he will say, yes, your one is right, everybody else is wrong. That includes yours, right? Everybody else is wrong, that includes yours. Now, as Muslims, this is where we make an interesting claim, which is, you know that 10% he said? We don't say it's 10% even. We say 99.99% scriptures are, or maybe even more, are all flawed. They will not stand the questioning, logical questioning. There is only one that will survive any question you throw at it, and that is the Quran. That is our claim. You can start throwing questions at it, and then you can find out whether it can stand. If you think it doesn't stand in some aspect, you can then contact us, look into it further, to have a clear understanding of what happens. According to us, that is the only book, the only scripture that will pass the three questions that Sadhguru has to destroy any scripture. But carefully watch the bit where he says 90% of the scriptures. So another 10% is correct, right? The 10% can still stand the questions that he's asking, according to his statement. So all the ideas are not ideas that you can just throw away. If the scripture is true, then the ideas presented in that scripture, you cannot then throw it away, because if the scripture is the right one, true one, then whatever it's saying is true, right? So that's the general understanding. But let's get into the video and see what Sadhguru says, because it's so interesting.
Okay. Heaven means what? Should I go into this? No. Anyway, everything is fantastic out there. That is the marketing.
So heaven means what? That's a important question, though. That is a very important question. Now he will go on with his way of explaining it, but you should really think about it. What actually is heaven? Why do we think about heaven? Why yeah, why is that even a question that we human beings we care about? How did it dawn on us? How did we realize that there may be something like a heaven? Right. That's a good question to think about, to ponder over.
Why nobody wants to go today? Because they don't know if it's really there.
That's not true. It's because, I mean, Sadhguru accepted or declared in a few places that he hasn't actually read any scripture. Even the Bhagavad Gita, he hasn't read that. So all his knowledge, all what he knows about these scriptures, even though he thinks his questions are going to destroy all of them, his knowledge is based on pretty much nothing, because his knowledge is based on what he heard probably from other people or what he thinks about these scriptures. So you can think all sorts of things, people can say all sorts of things, but unless you really read the scripture yourself, it is actually wrong of you, it is actually dishonest of you to make a comment on that scripture or on those scripture, right? But obviously, Sadhguru being the wise one, which I don't agree with, he has to, the wise one, he should really know everything anyway, isn't it? So let's see his response. Question is, why do everybody not go to heaven today? If you accept the concept of heaven, then you have to, because the concept of heaven comes from scripture. Now, scripture defines heaven in a certain way. You have to go with that definition. If you try to twist that definition and try to make it the way it suits your particular purpose, then you will be doing the wrong thing. Because according to the scripture that told you about heaven, the definitions are not matching. So you are talking about something which the scripture didn't talk about. So if we accept that this heaven concept comes from the scripture, then we are accepting the scripture as the authority of defining the heaven. So now to talk about the ideas of how to get into the heaven or what happens in the heaven, we again have to go back to the scripture. Now we cannot just make things up in our head. We have to go back to the scripture. What does the scripture says? You can go to heaven once you have died. Now, the word die means to die naturally. If somebody commits suicide, try to fasten the process of terminating his life in this world in some way, we know of some ways, that is called suicide. That is not death. That is not the normal death we talk about. So to go to heaven, you have to first die normally as per the scripture. So you have to live your life in the world, and then once you die, that's when the concept of heaven will kick in. Up until that point, the heaven is not going to have an impact on you. So that's a thing of the future. And now, from that, you can see that you cannot really commit suicide to make it quick to go to heaven. The other thing is there are other conditions as well. It's not only once you die, you will go to the heaven. There are other conditions you have to fulfill. So, and that comes from the scripture again. So now you look at those conditions. When you are in this part of the world, when you are not dead, you have to act in certain way. And Sadhguru obviously tries to, is a big proponent of bringing the heaven on earth. And if you look at the scripture, the true scripture, the only one that I talked about, the Quran, that gives you rules and regulations that you should live your life by, abide by these rules and regulations. And if you do that, the earth, your life, your society will actually become part of a heaven. And it has happened in the past. It was tested. It is a theory that was tested and in the past, and that was the result. The world, with all its limitations, still it becomes like a heaven. I mean, the heaven of obviously is a far, as per the scripture's definition, it's a different kind of place. The world, being the world it has its limitations, but still you can bring a touch of the heaven in here if you abide by the scripture, the law given by the true scripture. So there are conditions. It's not like if you just die, if you just got killed immediately, or if you commit suicide immediately, you're going to the heaven. No, it doesn't work like that, logically.
When somebody believes that it's really there, they will do totally dastardly things. All others, just a little psychological, hold on.
No. That second part, the psychological hold on, that's what you think, Sadhguru. That's what you think.
Food is best. If you're, in Hindu heaven, food is fantastic. If you're a if you're a foodie, you must go to Hindu heaven. In another place, all those white-gowned ladies are just floating around in the clouds. If you like that kind of ambience, you go there. In another place, you'll encounter virgin problems. If that's what you're looking forward to, that's where you go there.
By definition, the heaven is a place where you don't have problems. So, the last point that Sadhguru talked about, the place where there are virgin problems. In the heaven, there is no problem like that. And if your heaven has that problem, that's not heaven. You're not talking about the heaven. You're talking about something else. And you don't know what heaven is because you didn't actually go through the scripture. You didn't read the scripture. The Hindu heaven, food is good in the Hindu heaven. I mean, there are other, I haven't come across any definition of heaven where food is not good. So it's not only Hindu heaven. The heaven, heaven according to the true scripture, is a place where you will have good food. Is a place where you will have all sorts of pleasures. Anything that makes you happy, you will have it. Anything that makes you happy, you will have it. The heaven is a place where you will feel happy. Your all sorts of desires will be fulfilled. It's difficult to fathom the idea, being in the world where we have got so much problem and so much limitations, but we are defining heaven according to how it is defined in the scripture. So we have to go beyond our limited understanding. So that's that. It's not that you get different things in different heavens. It's the same heaven we are talking about, if it is the heaven of the scripture, if it is the true heaven we are talking about. And you will have good food. If there are floating ladies, if that has any impact on our satisfaction, if that's what we want, they will do that. And if you want to have virgins, you will have millions if you want, and still that will not be a problem. That will not be a problem, because the heaven place doesn't run on our worldly law.
But you must understand this. You go there only, what is the qualification to go there? You have to die. Hello?
Yeah, and there's nothing funny about that.
In LSE also? If you have to go to heaven, you have to die.
Yeah.
When you die, we usually either burn or bury or cut you and put you to birds. Depending on your culture, we do whatever. One thing is, this body is a loan from this planet. When you're done with it, you must put it back. If you've not done anything ecologically sensitive, this is one thing you will do. All right? So you left your body here and went to heaven. When you don't have a body, what do you do with good food and virgins and all this stuff? Am I?
That's a dumb question to ask, really. Why do I say that? You see, if you think about it, because the concept of heaven comes from the scripture, and the scripture says a lots of host of other things that now, based on the fact that you have taken the definition of the heaven from the scripture, you have to take that as true. Otherwise, no point of talking about the heaven at all. And so now you have to talk about these other things as well. Now, the good question is, if you think about it, death. What is death? That's a very good question. What is death? When you were alive, you had this body. If you touch yourself, you feel it. You had all these things going on, and you are growing up. Once upon a time, you were a tiny little baby, and now you have grown to a 6-foot man or a woman. So we see that things are happening in this body. Now, once we are dead, what happens? It rots, and it rots back to dead substances that belongs to the earth. Exactly true. So now the question is, what kept the body, which is built with dead substances, molecules, atoms, which are dead? They don't have life as in consciousness. We don't know, at least, of any molecule having a consciousness, molecule sitting somewhere and thinking about something. We haven't come across that yet. So, and looking at around the earth, we see the earth is full of dead objects. And the interesting thing is, among these dead objects, suddenly we see life. We have actually explored the universe quite a bit now. We have explored the universe quite a bit. We have looked into billions of things in the galaxy, in our billions of stars in our galaxy, billions of galaxies in our universe. So we have come across these things, and we haven't seen another planet, another object in the universe that has anything living in it. Only the earth has these living things in it, and these living things are coming from dead substances. Now, that's a very good question. How does that happen? If that can happen on the earth, and we don't know exactly how it happened, the scripture says, going back to the scripture says there is an entity called the all-powerful God who brought everything into existence. And he defined what is going to behave in what way. So the electrons and the protons and the neutrons and all the other parts of an atom, the way they behave, the rules that they follow, abide by, those rules are defined by that creator. So if he did that, and then he is the one, that creator is the one, I use the he word because just to mean, okay, I can use the it word, but yeah, you understand what I mean. The creator, let's use the word creator instead of he or she, because that's a contradiction, of course. I mean, that's a problem people raise. So the creator made you alive, and gave you a body that is made of dead substances, and got it to behave like a living object, living entity for so many years of your life. And now you think it is impossible for that creator to give you a experience of eating, of having virgins, meeting virgins, only because you haven't got a body. You have left your body behind. I mean, the question is, how did the body to start with work? How did it come up from a dead planet? How did it come up to start with? And obviously, Sadhguru will not go to this question. He will always refer back to the theory of evolution, which obviously, doesn't clarify, which doesn't tell us how life evolved on Earth, how from the dead substances life became a reality. And the more research that is taking place, they're coming up with more complexities And the question is becoming more complex, and I mean the answer is becoming more complex. So just assuming that it was a dead planet at one point, because it was a dead planet, because it, according to how the planet came into existence, we know that it was part of the sun at one point. Not boiling hot, it was tremendously hot, right? So in that heat there was no life, and then it kept on going through changes, and gradually life appeared there. And how did life come up from dead substances? Only in our planet, not in the billions of other planets that we that our scientists have already watched, already looked into. Why is that? That's a good question, right? And if a scripture then says that there is this creator who chose this planet and populated with life, does that not make sense? Does it make is it incomprehensible? Let's go forward and listen to what Sadhguru has to say.
These are all bodily issues, isn't it? Hello? When you have a body, all these things.
No, these are not bodily issues either. Even before you die, there is a neuroscientist. He is again from South India. The gentleman works in the California university now, I think. I forgot his name. Subramaniam. I forgot the name. I have to find the name, and I'll put the name in the description part of my video. That gentleman he's a brilliant neuroscientist. Okay, he's one of the best ones in the world. And he was born in South India, Kerala, and then he came from there he did his medicine degree from Delhi, then came to London, did from Cambridge, and then went to United States, and now he lives there. And he proved that you can sense things even if you don't have organs. He looked into this particular situation where, due to accidents or something, when somebody lost their limb, so you had an accident and one of your hand had to be chopped off. It got chopped off somehow, or it had to be amputated. And then these people, they're recovering from their physical damage, but deep in their mind, they are experiencing pain all the time. So if it happened like an accident, somebody got run over by a bus, say for example, and his hand was under the wheel. So the tremendous pain that he experienced at that point, obviously afterwards he fainted, he lost his consciousness. So then he didn't feel anything else. And then when he woke up, he realized that his hand was already chopped off. Now, the physical hand is not there, but he still feels the pain, the same pain that was that he felt when, or almost the same pain he felt that when his hand was under the wheel of the bus. And he looked into this weird situation. How can this person feel it when he doesn't actually have the physical limbs? So a sensation signal is not going from here, but in his brain he is feeling the pain. And he came up with a brilliant solution. What he did is he came up with a box, a cardboard box, put a mirror in the middle, and set the mirror in such a way that when the person sitting in here, when he looks at the mirror is faced this way, because he has got the right left hand, he doesn't have the right, so the mirror is faced this way. This is the reflective part of the mirror, the side of the mirror. It is placed in such a way that when he puts his hand inside that box through two holes, there are two holes made in the box, and the mirror was in the middle. When he puts his left hand through the middle, he can see in the mirror his left hand's reflection. Obviously, in the reflection, it looks like as if it is his right hand, right? Because the mirror is in the middle, and he doesn't have the right hand. And when he does that, immediately looking at that, he feels his hand is there. And when he moves his fingers, in his head, he feels that his right hand, which doesn't exist physically, is actually moving its fingers. He had that experience. It's absolutely brilliant experiment that he did. He's helped so many people with this experiment who were going through this pain, and there was no solution because medicine doesn't cure this particular problem. It was happening in their brain. So he got people to do this, and when this they did for 2 hours, 2 hours, sorry, they did it for 5 minutes, and they said, the pain is going away. The pain that I had on my right hand is going away. And that was interesting. And then they take their hands off and leave the thing behind. After a couple of hours, the pain comes back. And then they do this again. It goes away. And every time they do it, the duration of the pain going away is longer. So after doing it for a few days, then they come to a state where they feel the pain is not there anymore. And now they're okay with the fact that they haven't got the hand. Their brain kind of like knows. The doctor that I'm talking about, he explained it in a brilliant way, and it's because, I mean, he is such a brilliant mind. He realized that when the accident happened, the hand was chopped off because the person was unconscious. His brain actually remained held on to the image of the accident. So when the hand actually got chopped off, now no more signal was coming from the hand. So the brain held on to the old image, which was the image of the pain. And when he got the box solution for this guy, these guys, quite a few people actually got benefited by this, and got them to do this exercise. Because of their visual, visually the brain was actually fooled to believe that there is the other hand, and when it looked at the other hand and it believed that the other hand is there is nothing wrong with the hand, then the idea of there should be pain disappeared. Brilliant experiment. I'll give you the link in the description, and then you will understand. So the idea that you will need a physical body to experience things, even on the planet Earth, it has been proved that you don't need that. And we actually go through that every day. We think about things and go through the emotions. We think about holding our baby to our chest. We understand how it feels. As soon as we think about it, we actually go through the experience. We actually feel it, even though the baby is not with me now. We feel it. How is that? Do we actually need sensory input all the time from the body to experience things? No. So this question is a dumb question to ask.
So, I want to down the heavens. People should eat good food here. People should float around like angels here. Whatever lustful longings they have when they're young, they must finish it here. They should not become sick, dreaming that something is waiting for them up there. What do you think? Should we down the heaven? And above all, do you have any proof? Do you have any proof to prove to me that you are not already in heaven and making a mess out of it? Do you have any proof? You are already in heaven making a terrible mess out of it. If you sort yourself out, you will see this will feel like heaven. Of all the planets we know, in whatever explorations we have done in this universe, this is the best place. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
I don't. I mean, because when we say best place, that's a value judgment. How do we know this is the best place? Unless we know every other place that is out there. As far as we have seen, this seems to be the only place suitable for us, for life to exist. This is the only place where life exists. So in that sense, it is different than the others. But best, I don't know. Bringing the heaven on the earth, do you think that's practical? I mean, if the kind of idea that Sadhguru has in his mind about the heaven, can you actually bring it to the earth? You eat whatever you want to eat without really working for it. Is it possible? I don't see that possible. Then floating around, that is physically not possible. I mean, you cannot really float around. Mentally being in that state of happiness depends on the circumstances, so that is not 100% possible either. And the third thing is the virgin problem. You call it a problem, but that is something. Some people are going to the heaven, according to your definition, for virgins. So now you want to make the this place heaven, so you have to have lots of virgins. Is that possible? I don't think it is. And so if you look into the practical world, you see his solutions are not really workable. He is talking about something from the La La Land, which, I mean, if he decides to live in that La La Land, he's okay with that. But telling us all to live in that sort of a way, I think is quite foolish. And whether this world is not the heaven, that we don't know. We don't know that, actually. We don't know that. But given the amount of sufferings we can see in this world, by definition, the heaven will not have any suffering. So when we have come across suffering in our own lives, and we have seen sufferings in other people and other things as well, that proves to us in this world that this is not the heaven that is talked about in the scriptures. So this is not the heaven. It's proved.
You are already in heaven. Why are you such a mess? You need to sort this out. The only reason why you are such a mess is you are not fixed like other creatures. For all the other creatures, nature put two lines between which they live and die. But for human beings, there's only bottom line, there's no top line. That's what they're suffering. If you're suffering your limitations, I can understand. You're suffering your freedom, that is what is the disaster right now. If you were fixed like every creature, you wouldn't be stressed, isn't it? All other creatures are like this, stomach full, life settled. But you are made like this, stomach empty, only one problem, stomach full, 100 problems. This is simply because you are not able to handle your own faculties. We gave you a supercomputer, but you did not read the user's manual. That's all your problem is. Thank you.
So that was the answer. Now, if you look at the question, if you think about the question that was asked, the answer at the end, I don't know how that related to the solution. In the beginning of the term, we are joyful, we haven't got much to do, we haven't got any stress, we are happy. Makes logical sense. Towards the end of the term, we have lots of things to do, we have exams to take part in, and we have to pass these tests, so there is quite a bit of pressure on us, and so we get stressed out. Makes normal sense to me. I mean, it doesn't sound like an unrealistic situation. In a sense, you want to stay blissful in a situation which is where you should be under pressure, where you have to deliver a lot. That will be the wrong thing, because you have got to do all these things and you just sit there and don't do any of the work. You will end up getting a fail result. The grade you will get is a fail. So you should be under stress, and you should behave, you should act influenced by those stresses, so you get to your destination, get to the target that you set out to achieve to start with in the beginning of the term. And, well, once you accept that this is how the structure is going to be, in the beginning of the term, it's not going to be that stressful, but throughout the term we have to do things, and at the end there'll be exams and things, so we will go through a stressful time. If you just accept this whole paradigm, this whole concept, then immediately you find that, okay, it is something I accepted to start with before joining this course. I expected this, so it is not a surprise, and at that point, it is not really a pain. Yeah, we will act stressed, but deep inside we will not be really stressed because we already knew how this whole thing was going to go, right? So the solution is to, if you haven't understood that, the solution is basically to look into the whole structure, how the things are expected to happen. Once you know what is expected to happen, if something that happens and that is expected, you don't call it a surprise. You don't feel stressed about it, right? You feel stressed when things are happening and you didn't expect them to happen there. So the solution is basically to accept the whole idea that this is how it is, and telling yourself that, okay, this is what I'm embarking on. This is the course I'm taking. I'm embarking on this journey. It is going to be lively and fun at the beginning, and towards the end it will become quite tricky, but I've decided to go to the other end of the journey, so I have to take that, and then you'll feel in control. You'll not be miserable. So that's the end of this question, and that's my end of my review. I don't know how long this particular video has become, but I hope you can see my arguments and see how illogical some of the things that Sadhguru says, and how foolish some of the things are actually, if you think about the practicality of our lives in the earth. So if you don't agree with any of the concepts, please leave a comment explaining what it is that you don't agree with. If you start swearing at me, you can do that. And as I already said, your swearing doesn't affect me. Your swearing only tells me that you didn't have anything better to offer. So I'm perfectly happy with the fact that you will be swearing at me. It doesn't bother me at all. So rather, let's engage in a constructive discussion. If there are things that you think I've said logically wrong, then highlight those things, and probably we'll talk about it and we can learn from our mistakes. So with that, I'll end it here today. I'll see you again, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.